The winter of 1884 came to Montana like a ravenous wolf, howling through the pines and gnawing at the bones of the earth. Snow fell in thick curtains across the northern ranges, burying trails and landmarks beneath a uniform shroud of white. The forest stood silent save for the occasional crack of branches breaking under the weight of ice, or the distant cry of some creature struggling against the merciless cold. In a clearing carved from the wilderness, a solitary cabin squatted like a dark stone against the endless white. Smoke curled from its chimney, the only sign that life persisted in this frozen corner of creation. Inside, Nathaniel Cole sat before the fire, cleaning his rifle with the mechanical precision of a man who had performed the task 1,000 times before. At 36, Nathaniel bore the weathered features of someone who had lived hard years. Deep lines etched the corners of his gray eyes, and silver threaded through his dark beard. His hands, scarred and calloused, moved with practiced efficiency as he ran the oiled cloth along the barrel. Once, those hands had worn a badge. Once, they had held a woman and cradled a child. Now they knew only the cold metal of weapons and tools, the rough grain of wood, and the loneliness that settled into a man's bones deeper than any winter chill. The storm had been building all day. Through the cabin's single window, Nathaniel had watched the sky darken from pearl to slate to the color of old iron. Now, as midnight approached, the wind shrieked like all the demons of hell had been loosed upon the mountain. Snow drove against the walls in furious gusts, and the whole structure groaned under the assault. Nathaniel set aside his rifle and reached for the bottle of whiskey on the rough table beside him. The burn of it down his throat was familiar comfort, a small fire to match the larger one crackling in the hearth. He had learned to treasure such simple pleasures in his exile: the warmth of flame, the bite of liquor, the blessed silence of his own thoughts when the memories grew quiet enough to bear. Then came the pounding at the door. 3 sharp raps, desperate and urgent, barely audible above the storm's fury. Nathaniel froze, the bottle halfway to his lips. No one came to his cabin. The nearest settlement was 15 miles through treacherous passes, and the few trappers who knew of his existence had learned to keep their distance. In weather like this, any traveler should have been holed up somewhere safe, not wandering the mountain paths. The pounding came again, weaker this time. Nathaniel set down the bottle and rose slowly, his hand moving instinctively to the Colt revolver at his hip. Experience had taught him that unexpected visitors rarely brought anything good. He approached the door with the caution of a man who had survived too much to trust in coincidence. "Who's there?" he called out, voice rough from disuse. The response was too faint to make out, lost in the wind's howling, but there was something in its pitch, its desperation, that made him pause. Keeping one hand on his gun, he lifted the heavy bar and cracked the door open. The figure that tumbled through might have been a ghost. So pale and ethereal did she appear against the swirling snow. A young woman, perhaps 25 years old, collapsed to her knees on his floor, her whole body shaking with violent tremors. Ice crusted her dark hair, and her dress, once fine blue wool, now torn and soaked through, clung to her slight frame. Her lips had turned the color of mountain violets, and when she raised her face to look at him, her brown eyes held the wild terror of a hunted animal. "Please," she gasped through chattering teeth. "Please, let me stay." Nathaniel stood frozen for a moment, caught between instinct and surprise. Then training took over. He holstered his gun, barred the door against the storm, and knelt beside the shivering woman. Her skin felt like ice when he touched her arm. "Can you stand?" She nodded weakly and let him help her to her feet. He guided her to the chair by the fire, noting how she limped slightly, favoring her right foot. Blood had soaked through her boot. She'd been walking a long time in unsuitable shoes. "Thank you," she whispered, extending trembling hands toward the flames. "Thank you." Nathaniel fetched a blanket from his bed and wrapped it around her shoulders, then set about heating water for tea. He moved efficiently, not speaking, giving her time to warm herself while he assessed the situation. Her dress marked her as a woman of some means. though its current state suggested she'd been traveling rough for some time. No coat, no gloves, no provisions. Whoever she was, she hadn't planned to be out in this weather. "What's your name?" he asked finally, handing her a cup of hot tea laced with whiskey. She accepted it gratefully, wrapping both hands around the warmth. "Eliza," she said after a long pause. Just that. No family name, no explanation. "I'm Nathaniel. This is my place." He settled into the chair across from her, maintaining a careful distance. "You want to tell me what you're doing out here in the middle of a blizzard?" Eliza's eyes darted toward the door, as if expecting someone to burst through despite the bar. "I got lost. The storm came up sudden." It was a lie, and not a good one. Nathaniel had spent enough years reading people to recognize the signs, the way her gaze wouldn't meet his, the defensive hunch of her shoulders, the white-knuckled grip on the cup. But he also recognized the exhaustion in her face, the kind that came from running too hard for too long. "You alone?" She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Anyone likely to come looking for you?" This time she flinched, just slightly. "No. No one knows where I am." Another lie, perhaps, or maybe a desperate hope. Nathaniel studied her over the rim of his own cup. Pretty, despite her current state, with delicate features that spoke of gentle breeding. Not the kind of woman who belonged in these mountains. Certainly not alone. Certainly not in winter. "You can stay the night," he said finally. "Storm should blow itself out by morning." Relief washed over her face so profoundly that he wondered what exactly she was running from. "Thank you. I don't want to be any trouble. I can sleep on the floor, by the fire. I won't bother you. I promise." "Take the bed," Nathaniel said gruffly, rising to fetch more blankets. "I don't sleep much anyway." It was true enough. Sleep brought dreams, and dreams brought faces he'd rather forget. He preferred the honest insomnia of long nights watching the fire burn down to embers. As he arranged a pallet for himself near the hearth, Eliza struggled to remove her frozen boots. She made small sounds of pain as she worked them off, revealing feet rubbed raw and bleeding. Nathaniel wordlessly fetched clean rags and a basin of warm water, setting them beside her. "You need to tend those before they fester." She looked up at him with something like wonder. "Why are you helping me?" The question caught him off guard. He turned away, busying himself with banking the fire. Man would have to be a monster to turn someone out in weather like this. "Some men are monsters," she said quietly, and there was weight to the words that made him look back at her. Their eyes met for a long moment, and in hers he saw shadows that matched his own. Whatever had driven her to his door, it was more than just the storm. But that was her business, not his. He'd learned the hard way that getting involved in other people's troubles only led to more of his own. "There's food in the pot if you're hungry," he said, deliberately breaking the moment. "Venison stew. Nothing fancy." "It sounds wonderful," she said, and he believed she meant it. They ate in companionable silence, the storm raging outside while the fire crackled within. Eliza ate like someone who hadn't seen food in days, though she tried to hide her hunger with delicate manners. When she finished, she sat back with a soft sigh, some color finally returning to her cheeks. "I should explain," she began, but Nathaniel held up a hand. "No need. Your business is your own. Come mornin', you can be on your way, and we'll forget this night ever happened." She studied him with those dark eyes, and he had the uncomfortable feeling she saw more than he intended to show. "You're not curious? Curiosity's a luxury I gave up some time ago. Along with company, it seems—" She gestured around the sparse cabin. "You live here alone?" "I do." "By choice." "Does it matter?" She considered this, then shook her head. "I suppose not. We all have our reasons for the lives we choose, or the lives that choose us." There was a philosophy in that statement that suggested education, refinement, more pieces of a puzzle Nathaniel told himself he didn't want to solve. He stood abruptly, gathering their empty bowls. "Bed's yours when you're ready. I'll keep watch." "Watch for what?" He didn't answer, but they both knew. Whatever she was running from, it might follow. And despite his resolve to stay uninvolved, Nathaniel found himself checking the load in his rifle, positioning it within easy reach. Old habits died hard, and older instincts never died at all. Eliza rose unsteadily, clearly exhausted. She paused at the entrance to the small sleeping alcove, looking back at him. "Nathaniel, thank you, truly. I know I'm a stranger, and you've no cause to trust me." "Trust's got nothing to do with it." He cut her off. "Basic human decency says you don't leave someone to freeze. That's all this is." She nodded slowly, though something in her expression suggested she didn't quite believe him. "Still, thank you." She disappeared behind the curtain that separated the sleeping area from the main room. Nathaniel heard the rustle of fabric as she settled into bed. Then silence, save for the storm and the fire. He poured himself another whiskey and settled into his chair, rifle across his knees. Through the window, snow continued to fall in thick sheets, erasing the world beyond the cabin walls. Somewhere out in that white darkness, whatever had driven Eliza to his door was still out there. He could feel it, the way he'd once felt ambushes waiting in the Texas brush. The hours crawled by. Nathaniel fed the fire, checked the door, and tried not to think about the woman sleeping in his bed. It had been 3 years since he'd shared this space with another soul, and her presence seemed to fill the cabin in ways that had nothing to do with physical space. Near dawn, when the wind had died to a whisper and the snow fell gentle as prayers, he heard her crying out in her sleep. Soft whimpers at first, then louder protests. Words tumbling out in frightened confusion. "No, please, I won't go back. You can't make me." Nathaniel rose, moving to the curtain but not beyond it. "Eliza," he called softly. "Eliza, wake up. You're safe." The crying stopped abruptly. He heard her sharp intake of breath, the rustle of blankets as she oriented herself. "I'm sorry," she called out, voice thick with tears. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Wasn't asleep," he assured her. "You all right?" A long pause. "Yes, just dreams." He understood about dreams, about the way they ambushed you when your guard was down. "Try to rest. Still a few hours till dawn." "Nathaniel," her voice was very small. "Are we truly safe here?" He thought about lying, offering comfort, but something about this woman, about the strange honesty of their isolation, demanded truth. "For tonight, yes. Can't speak for tomorrow. Tonight is enough," she whispered. "Tonight is everything." As the first pale light of dawn crept across the snow, Nathaniel maintained his vigil. The storm had passed, leaving the world transformed into something pristine and deadly beautiful. Come full light, decisions would have to be made. She would have to go, of course. Whatever trouble followed her, he couldn't afford to let it find him here. But for now, in the gray between night and morning, he allowed himself this strange peace. A woman slept in his bed, trusting him to keep watch. The fire burned low and warm, and for the first time in 3 years, his cabin felt less like a tomb and more like what it had once been, a shelter from the storm. Morning light filtered through the frost-etched window, casting pale shadows across the cabin floor. Eliza emerged from behind the curtain, moving carefully as if testing whether the world would hold her weight. In daylight, Nathaniel could better assess his unexpected guest. Despite the torn dress and tangled hair, she carried herself with unconscious grace, the kind that came from years of proper posture and dancing lessons. Her hands, though currently roughened, showed no calluses from hard labor. "Good morning," she offered tentatively, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Nathaniel nodded from his position by the fire, where he was preparing coffee. "Storm's passed. Coffee'll be ready soon." She approached slowly, favoring her injured foot. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some," he lied. In truth, he'd spent the hours cataloging every sound, every shift in the wind, waiting for trouble that hadn't come. Yet, Eliza settled into the chair she'd occupied the night before, watching him work. The morning light revealed details darkness had hidden. A bruise fading to yellow on her jaw. Scratches on her hands that looked defensive. The way she held herself slightly turned as if protecting injured ribs. "I should go," she said suddenly. "I've imposed enough on your kindness." Nathaniel poured coffee into 2 cups, handing her one. "Where exactly would you go? Nearest town is 15 miles, and that's if you know the trails, which you don't." She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "I'll manage. I have to. In those shoes. With those feet." He gestured to her ruined boots. "You wouldn't make it 2 miles before frostbite took your toes." Her jaw set stubbornly. "Then I'll wait here for my feet to heal and what? Hope whoever you're running from doesn't track you here?" The words came out harsher than intended. But Nathaniel was tired, and her obvious fear was starting to infect him with its own unease. Eliza flinched, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the cup's rim. "I told you, no one's following me. Woman doesn't brave a blizzard in dancing slippers because she's out for an evening stroll," Nathaniel countered. "Those bruises didn't come from falling in the snow, and you jump like a spooked deer every time the wind rattles the door." She set down her cup with trembling hands. "Why do you care? You made it clear last night. Basic human decency. Nothing more. So why does it matter what I'm running from?" It was a fair question. One Nathaniel couldn't fully answer even to himself. Maybe it was the way she'd thanked him, like kindness was something rare and precious. Maybe it was the familiar look in her eyes, the kind that came from carrying wounds that wouldn't heal. Or maybe he'd just been alone too long, and even trouble seemed better than more silence. "It matters," he said finally. "Because if trouble comes calling, I need to know what I'm facing." Eliza stood abruptly, pacing to the window despite her limp. She stared out at the pristine snow, arms wrapped around herself. "You're right to be suspicious. I'm not what I appear to be, or rather, I am exactly what I appear to be. A foolish woman who trusted the wrong person. Husband?" The word seemed to strike her like a physical blow. She nodded once, sharply. "In name only. Darius Muncie. Perhaps you've heard of him?" Nathaniel had. Muncie owned one of the largest cattle operations in Wyoming, with a reputation for ruthlessness that extended beyond business. The kind of man who collected wives like he collected land, through whatever means necessary. "Heard of him," Nathaniel admitted. "Also heard he doesn't take kindly to people crossing him." A bitter laugh escaped her. "No, he doesn't, especially not wives who dare to leave without permission." She turned from the window, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "So now you know. I'm a runaway wife. A woman without honor in the eyes of the law and society. You'd be within your rights to send me back. That what you think I'd do? It's what most would do. A wife belongs to her husband. That's the law. The law and what's right don't always walk the same path," Nathaniel said quietly. "Learned that the hard way myself." Something shifted in her expression, curiosity replacing some of the fear. "You were a lawman once. I can tell by how you hold yourself, how you watch everything." He neither confirmed nor denied it. "Question is, what do you plan to do now? Can't run forever, especially not in winter. And Muncie's got resources, men, money, connections. He'll find you eventually." "Then I'll keep running until he doesn't." The defiance in her voice was admirable, if unrealistic. "I'd rather freeze in these mountains than go back to that house." Nathaniel studied her, weighing options. The smart thing would be to give her supplies and send her on her way. Let her take her chances with the wilderness rather than bring her troubles to his door. He'd come here to escape his past, not to get tangled in someone else's, but when had he ever done the smart thing? "You know anything useful?" he asked abruptly. "Can you cook, sew, handle livestock?" Hope flickered in her eyes. Yes, I can cook, though nothing fancy. I can sew, tend a garden. I helped manage my father's household before." She stopped herself. "Before?" "Then here's the deal. You stay on as help around the place. Cook, mend what needs mending. Keep the cabin in order. In exchange, you get shelter and food until spring. Come thaw, we figure out how to get you somewhere safe. somewhere Muncie won't think to look. You'd do that? Harbor a runaway wife? I'm not harboring anyone. I'm hiring help for the winter. What you're running from is your business, long as it doesn't bring trouble to my door. She searched his face, looking for the trap, the hidden cost. And what do you expect in return? Beyond the housework? The implication hung between them, ugly and necessary. Nathaniel felt anger rise in his throat, not at her, but at whatever had taught her to expect such transactions. I expect meals cooked and clothes mended, he said evenly. Nothing more. You'll sleep in the bed. I'll keep to my pallet by the fire. You've my word on that. Tears gathered in her eyes, though she blinked them back fiercely. Your word. Do you know how long it's been since anyone offered me their word and meant it? No, but I know what it's like to need to trust someone and have nowhere else to turn. She moved then, limping back to the chair and sinking into it as if her legs could no longer hold her. Very well. I accept your offer. Mr. I don't even know your last name. Cole. Nathaniel Cole. Mr. Cole. She attempted a smile, though it wavered. I'm a hard worker. You won't regret this kindness. He already did, a little, but regret was an old companion, and he'd learned to live with its weight. The day passed in establishing new rhythms. Eliza insisted on starting immediately, despite her injuries. She cleaned dishes, swept floors, and took inventory of his meager supplies with a determination that spoke of desperate need to prove her worth. Nathaniel watched her work, noting how she had to stop periodically to catch her breath, pressing a hand to her ribs. You're hurt worse than you're letting on. He observed over the noon meal she'd prepared, simple fare, but better seasoned than anything he'd managed in months. It's nothing. Old injuries. She kept her eyes on her plate. How old? Does it matter? Might, if they're going to keep you from working, or if they need tending. She set down her fork carefully. 3 weeks, perhaps 4. I've lost track of days. They're healing. Mind if I take a look? I've some experience with field medicine. The request clearly made her uncomfortable, but after a long moment, she nodded. I suppose, if you think it necessary. She stood stiffly, unbuttoning just enough of her dress to reveal the fading bruises along her ribs. Nathaniel kept his examination clinical, though rage built in his chest at the clear imprint of boot marks. Someone had kicked her while she was down, more than once. 2 cracked ribs, from the feel of it, he said, stepping back. They're knitting, but you need to be careful. No heavy lifting for a while yet. I've managed this long, she said, quickly refastening her dress. You've survived this long. There's a difference. That evening, as she prepared supper, Nathaniel found himself studying her movements. Despite her injuries, she worked with quiet efficiency, humming softly under her breath. It was a hymn, he realized. Amazing grace. The melody filled the cabin's corners in a way that made him understand just how empty they'd been. You have education, he said suddenly. The way you speak, carry yourself. You read, too. She glanced at him from the stove. My father believed in education for daughters as well as sons. He was progressive in that way. What happened to him? Her hand stilled on the pot she was stirring. He died. 2 summers passed, left debts he'd hidden from the family. Mr. Muncie offered to pay them in exchange for... She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. So you were sold to clear debts. Married, that's the proper term. Bitterness crept into her voice. A business transaction dressed in white lace and wedding vows. Nathaniel understood business transactions, the kind where human lives became currency. He'd seen enough of them in his former life, had sometimes been the one enforcing them. The memory sat like lead in his stomach. After supper, Eliza discovered his small shelf of books. Her face lit up with genuine pleasure, the first unguarded emotion he'd seen from her. May I? She asked, running her fingers along the spines. Help yourself. She selected a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets, handling it like precious glass. I haven't seen books in so long, Darius didn't approve of women reading, said it gave them ideas. Man afraid of his wife's ideas is a man who knows he's in the wrong, Nathaniel observed. She looked at him sharply, then smiled. A real smile that transformed her face. You're an unusual man, Mr. Cole. Nathaniel, he corrected. If you're going to be staying here, might as well drop the formalities. Nathaniel, then... She tested the name carefully. And you must call me Eliza. That night, she read by the fire while he cleaned his guns and checked his traps. The domestic scene should have felt foreign after 3 years of solitude. But instead it felt like something clicking back into place. Dangerous thinking. He warned himself. Come spring, she'd be gone, and he'd return to his isolation. This was temporary shelter, nothing more. But when she read aloud, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments," her voice soft and cultured in the firelight, he let himself imagine, just for a moment, that temporary might become something else. Then he pushed the thought away, buried it deep with all the other things he couldn't afford to want, as the fire burned low. Eliza closed the book carefully. I should retire. Thank you for today, for giving me purpose. Everyone needs purpose, he said roughly. She stood, then paused. Nathaniel, what made you leave it behind? The law, I mean... He was quiet so long she probably thought he wouldn't answer. Finally. Lost something. Someone. Couldn't see the point in upholding laws that didn't protect what mattered most. Understanding dawned in her eyes. I'm sorry. Was a long time ago? Time doesn't always heal, does it? Sometimes it just teaches us to carry the weight better. She bid him good night before he could respond, disappearing behind the curtain. But her words lingered, true as any he'd heard. He sat watching the dying fire, rifle across his knees, and wondered if sharing weight might make it lighter, or if it would only break them both. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. Whatever was coming, and something was surely coming. At least tonight they had warmth, shelter, and the fragile beginning of trust. In the morning, he'd teach her to load a rifle, just in case. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, the cabin felt less like a place of exile and more like what it was meant to be, a refuge from the storm. The wolves came with the full moon, their howls threading through the darkness like needles through cloth. Eliza shot upright in bed, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The sound triggered something primal, a fear that went deeper than reason. Just wolves, Nathaniel called from the main room, his voice calm and steady. They won't come near the cabin. But she was already up, bare feet on cold floor, appearing in the doorway wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes were wide, almost feral in the firelight. How many? Pack of 6, maybe 7. They follow the elk herds down from the high country. He didn't move from his chair, hoping his stillness would calm her. Been hearing them all week. Another howl rose, closer this time, and Eliza pressed back against the doorframe. The terror in her face went beyond simple fear of predators. Nathaniel had seen that look before, in soldiers who'd been hunted by Apache scouts, in women who'd survived Indian raids. It was the look of prey. They can't get in, he said firmly. Walls are solid, doors barred. You're safe. She laughed, a broken sound. Safe? I don't even remember what that means anymore. Her knees seemed to give way, and she slid down the door frame to sit on the floor, pulling the blanket tighter. He used to... Darius kept dogs, hunting dogs, would set them loose when he was angry, let them chase me through the house, said it was training, for them and for me. The rifle across Nathaniel's knees felt suddenly inadequate against the kind of cruelty she described. He rose slowly, crossing to where she sat, and lowered himself to the floor beside her. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel another human presence. He's not here, Nathaniel said quietly. Neither are his dogs, just wild wolves doing what wolves do, hunting to survive. Nothing personal in it, unlike men, she whispered. They sat in silence. listening to the pack move through the forest. Gradually, Eliza's breathing steadied, though she remained tense as a drawn bow. When another howl rose, she flinched but didn't panic. "Would you teach me?" she asked suddenly. "To shoot. I mean, you mentioned it before." "You sure you want to learn?" "I'm tired of being afraid of every sound, every shadow. If something's coming for me, I want to face it standing up, not cowering in a corner." "All right," he agreed. "Tomorrow, if the weather holds." She turned to look at him then, and their faces were very close in the dim light. "Why are you kind to me?" The question caught him off guard. "I told you, basic human decency." "Yes, but it's more than that. You could have sent me away by now." "Most men would have." Nathaniel studied the fire, searching for words. "Maybe I see something of myself in you. Someone trying to outrun the past, finding out it's got longer legs than we thought." "What are you running from?" He was quiet so long she probably thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, failed to protect what mattered. Wife, son. They were killed while I was away, chasing outlaws who didn't matter half as much as what I left behind. Eliza's hand moved slightly, as if to reach for him, then stopped. "I'm sorry. Like you said, time teaches us to carry the weight." He stood abruptly, the moment too raw, too close. "You should try to sleep. Wolves will move on by dawn." But she didn't move. "Nathaniel, would you stay here just until I fall asleep? I know it's foolish, but not foolish." He retrieved his rifle and settled back against the wall near her. "Get some rest. I'll keep watch." She curled up there on the floor, wrapped in her blanket like a child, and he fought the urge to carry her back to bed. That would cross a line he'd drawn, one that kept them both safe in ways that had nothing to do with wolves or weather. Morning came crisp and bright, the kind of day that made the mountains look like they'd been carved from crystal. True to his word, Nathaniel set up targets behind the cabin, old cans and bottles arranged on a fallen log. Eliza emerged bundled in one of his old coats, looking almost lost in its bulk, but her jaw was set with determination as she approached the rifle he held out. "It's heavier than I expected," she said, testing its weight. "That's a Henry repeater, .44 caliber. Good rifle, accurate, reliable. Here." He moved behind her, adjusting her stance, feet shoulder-width apart, left foot slightly forward. She tensed as he positioned her arms, and he was careful to keep his touch impersonal, instructional. Still, he couldn't help noticing how small she felt, how the crown of her head barely reached his chin. "Breathe steady," he instructed. "Don't hold your breath when you aim. See the notch at the back? Line that up with the post at the front, then put both on your target." Her first shot went wide, the recoil startling her. The second hit the ground short, but she kept trying, adjusting her aim each time with the focused intensity of someone learning to save their own life. "You're anticipating the recoil," Nathaniel observed. "Tensing up before you shoot. Try to stay relaxed until after the bullet leaves the barrel." She nodded, settling the rifle again. This time when she fired, the can jumped off the log with a satisfying ping. "I hit it." She turned to him with such joy that he couldn't help but smile. "You did. Now do it again." They spent the morning there, Eliza gradually improving until she could hit more often than she missed. When they finally stopped, her shoulder was sore, but her eyes were bright with accomplishment. "Thank you," she said, handing back the rifle. "I feel different, less helpless." "What? Knowing how to defend yourself is good," Nathaniel agreed. "But don't let it make you overconfident. A gun's just a tool. The real weapon is up here." He tapped his temple, staying calm, thinking clear. That's what saves lives. They walked back toward the cabin together, snow crunching under their boots. The day was warming, icicles beginning to drip from the eaves. It would have been peaceful if not for the way Eliza suddenly stopped, staring at the tree line. "What is it? Thought I saw—" She shook her head. "Nothing, just shadows." But Nathaniel trusted her instincts. He'd learned that people who'd been hunted developed a sense for danger, like deer scenting wolves. He scanned the trees, seeing nothing unusual but filing the moment away. That evening, as she prepared supper, the domesticity of the scene struck him anew. She'd taken to the cabin's routines as if she'd always been there, finding ways to make the sparse space more comfortable. She'd mended his shirts, organized his supplies, even fashioned curtains from an old blanket to give the window more privacy. "Smells good," he commented, watching her stir a pot of rabbit stew. "My mother's recipe, or as close as I can manage with what we have." She glanced at him. "I've been meaning to ask, do you trap all your meat?" "Trap some, hunt the rest. There's a root cellar out back with preserves. Smoked meat. Should see us through winter if we're careful." "Us?" She tested the word. Strange how natural that sounds after only a week. It did sound natural, which worried him. He was getting too comfortable with her presence, too accustomed to conversation and shared meals. Come spring, when she left, the silence would be that much harder to bear. After supper, she surprised him by pulling out a deck of cards from somewhere. "Found these in a drawer. Do you play?" "Been a while. My father taught me poker. Said a lady should know how to read faces, even if she'd never gamble in public." They played by firelight, using beans for stakes. Eliza had a good poker face when she remembered to use it, but excitement gave her away when she held good cards. Nathaniel found himself deliberately losing hands just to see her smile. "You're letting me win," she accused after taking another pot. "Prove it." She studied him across the small table. "You get this little line right here." She gestured to the corner of her mouth. "When you're folding a good hand." He was impressed despite himself. "You're observant. I've had to be." The lightness left her voice. Reading faces can mean the difference between a calm evening and... She didn't finish. The reminder of her reality sobered them both. Nathaniel dealt another hand in silence, but the easy mood was broken. That night, snow began falling again, heavy and steady. Nathaniel made his usual rounds, checking locks and loading weapons, when something made him pause at the window. There, a flash of movement at the edge of the clearing. Could be a deer, or wolf, or could be something else. He didn't mention it to Eliza, but he spent extra time banking the fire and double-checking the door. When she emerged for her usual good night, he was cleaning his pistol with perhaps more focus than necessary. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Fine. Just maintaining equipment." She wasn't fooled. "You saw something. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, we're secure here." She bit her lip. A gesture he'd learned meant she was weighing whether to speak. "Finally. If they come, when they come, I won't go back. I need you to know that, whatever happens, I won't go back to him." The implication in her words was clear. He set down the pistol, meeting her eyes directly. "Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. Not while I'm breathing." "You don't owe me that level of protection." "Maybe not, but I'm offering it anyway." She crossed to him then, surprising them both. Her hand settled over his on the table, light as a bird, but warm. "I brought danger to your door. I'm sorry for that. Haven't seen any danger yet, just snow and shadows. Still," she squeezed his hand gently, "whatever happens, these days of peace, they've meant everything. To feel human again, to remember who I was before." Her voice caught, without thinking. Nathaniel turned his hand palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. It was the first real touch between them since that initial night, and it hit him like a shock of lightning. Her hands were smaller than his, calloused now from work, but still elegant. "Eliza," he said, and wasn't sure what he meant to say next. She seemed to understand anyway. I know we can't, that this isn't..." She pulled her hand away gently. "But thank you for letting me pretend, just for a while, that life could be different." After she'd gone to bed, Nathaniel sat in the dark, standing watch as he had every night since her arrival. But tonight felt different. The space where her hand had been seemed to burn. He thought of his wife, dead these 3 years, and wondered if she'd forgive him for feeling alive again, even for just that moment. The wolves howled again in the distance, but this time the sound didn't seem threatening, Just lonely creatures calling to each other across the vast darkness, seeking connection in a cold world. He understood the feeling all too well. By dawn, the snow had piled another foot deep, sealing them in together for at least another day. Nathaniel told himself this was inconvenient, that he should be wishing for clear weather so she could move on. But when Eliza appeared, smiling sleepily and reaching for the coffee pot like she belonged there, he couldn't make himself wish for anything but more time. The storm would end eventually. Danger would come, in one form or another. But for now, they had warmth and walls and the fragile, impossible gift of each other's company. In the harsh mathematics of survival, that counted for more than gold. "Good morning," she said, and the simple greeting felt like a promise. "Morning," he replied, and let himself believe, just for now, that they might have more mornings just like this one. The thaw came sudden and false, one of those mountain tricks that lured the unwary into thinking winter had loosened its grip. Water dripped from icicles, and patches of brown earth showed through the snow like old wounds. It was on such a morning that the riders appeared. Nathaniel spotted them first, two dark shapes moving against the white landscape, following the trail that led to his cabin. His hand found the rifle before conscious thought kicked in. "Eliza," he called quietly. "Company coming." She appeared from the back room where she'd been mending, her face going pale. Without a word, she moved to the window, peering out carefully. The change in her was immediate. Her whole body went rigid, hands clenching into fists. "I don't recognize them," she whispered. "But that doesn't mean—" "Get the Henry rifle," Nathaniel instructed. "Remember what I taught you. Stay back from the windows." The riders came on steady, making no effort to conceal their approach. As they drew closer, Nathaniel could make out details: weather-beaten faces, good horses, guns worn easy at their hips. These weren't casual travelers lost in the mountains. They stopped just outside comfortable shooting range. The elder of the two, a grizzled man with steel-gray whiskers, called out, "Hello, the cabin. Looking for somebody. Mean no trouble if we don't find any." Nathaniel cracked the door, rifle visible but not directly threatening. "State your business." "Name's Hayes. This here's Murphy." "We're looking for a woman might have passed this way. Young, dark-haired, probably in some distress. Substantial reward for information leading to her safe return." Behind him, Nathaniel heard Eliza's sharp intake of breath. He kept his voice level. "Haven't seen anyone matching that description. Storms kept the trails closed until recent." Hayes studied him with pale eyes that missed nothing. "Mind if we water our horses? Long ride ahead." It would be more suspicious to refuse. "There's a creek 50 yards east. Help yourselves." The men dismounted, but Nathaniel noticed how they kept their horses between themselves and the cabin, hands never far from their weapons. These were professionals, likely detectives or bounty men rather than common thugs. Murphy, younger and lean as a whip, spoke up. "Funny thing is, we tracked her this far before the storm hit. Trail went cold right about here." "Storms do that," Nathaniel said flatly. "Erase things." "That they do." Hayes agreed amiably. "Still, man in your position, living alone and all, might appreciate some company, especially the kind that pays well for simple information. I appreciate solitude. That's why I live where I do." Hayes's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well now, that's interesting. See, the thing is, this woman, she's not well, touched in the head. You understand, her husband's worried sick, just wants her home safe where she can get proper care." The lie was smooth, practiced. How many times had they used it? How many desperate souls had been dragged back to their tormentors by men like these? "Like I said, haven't seen her. Now, if you'll excuse me—" "One more thing," Murphy interrupted. "We'll be making camp down the mountain a ways. Case she turns up. Substantial reward. Like Hayes said, enough to make a man comfortable for years." He paused meaningfully. "Or uncomfortable, depending." The threat was subtle but clear. Nathaniel met the younger man's gaze steadily. "I'll keep that in mind." They took their time at the creek, clearly hoping to spot some sign of Eliza. But Nathaniel had been careful. No women's clothing on the line, no extra tracks in the snow. Finally. They mounted up and rode on, though Nathaniel doubted they'd go far. He waited a full 10 minutes before closing and barring the door. When he turned, Eliza stood in the middle of the room, still clutching the rifle, trembling like an aspen leaf. "They know," she said. "They know I'm here. They suspect. That's different from knowing. You should have turned me in." Her voice was dull, defeated. "The reward. To hell with their blood money," Nathaniel said sharply. "And to hell with them." She set down the rifle and sank into a chair. "You don't understand. Darius doesn't give up, ever. Those men will watch and wait, and eventually they'll find proof. And then nothing. They're not taking you. You can't fight them all. He'll send more if these fail, and more after that." Tears started down her cheeks. "I should leave. Tonight. Lead them away from here before. You wouldn't make it a mile before they caught you." Nathaniel moved to stand before her. "Eliza, look at me." She raised tear-bright eyes to his face. "We knew this was coming. Now it's here. We deal with it." "How? How do you deal with men who have the law on their side, who can do whatever they want because a piece of paper says I belong to him?" The words came out in a rush. "Do you know what he did to me? Do you want to know? Only if you need to tell it." She laughed bitterly. "Need? I don't even know what I need anymore. To disappear, to stop being afraid, to stop feeling his hands." She broke off, wrapping her arms around herself. Nathaniel knelt before her chair, not touching but close. "He's not here. Those are just memories." "Memories?" She spoke the word like it was foreign. "You want to know the worst part? I actually thought I could do it. Be a good wife. Make the best of things. My mother survived a loveless marriage. I thought I could too, but Darius, he didn't want a wife. He wanted something to own, to break." The anger that rose in Nathaniel's chest was cold and familiar, the kind he'd felt facing down men who hurt those weaker than themselves. But anger wouldn't help her now. "The first time I tried to leave, he was almost amused," Eliza continued, voice distant. "Brought me back, locked me in my room for a week. The second time, he broke my wrist, said it was to help me remember my place. The third time, you don't have to, the third time, he told me if I ran again, he'd hurt my sister. She's only 16, still at home with my stepmother. Said he'd collect her as payment for my disobedience." She met Nathaniel's eyes. "So I stayed, endured, until I heard him making arrangements to have her brought to the ranch anyway. That's when I knew I had to run. Had to get far enough away that he'd focus on finding me instead of—" Her voice broke entirely then. Without thinking, Nathaniel reached out, pulling her down into his arms. She came willingly, sobbing against his shoulder, her whole body shaking with the force of released fear and guilt. He held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring meaningless comfort. She felt small and breakable, but also fierce, like a wild thing that had been caged too long. When her sobs finally quieted, she didn't pull away. "I've ruined your shirt," she said against his shoulder. "I've got others." She laughed weakly, then lifted her head. They were very close, her face inches from his. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear, seeing him truly for perhaps the first time. "Nathaniel," she whispered. He should have moved back, should have remembered boundaries and honor and all the reasons this was dangerous. Instead, he lifted a hand to her face, thumb brushing away a lingering tear. "You're the first person in 2 years who's made me feel human," she said. "Not property, not prey, human." "Eliza," she kissed him, soft, tentative, like she was remembering how such things were supposed to go. He froze, caught between desire and conscience. Then she made a small sound of loss and started to pull back. That broke his resolve. He caught her face between his hands and kissed her properly, pouring 3 years of loneliness and grief and unwanted hope into the connection. She responded with equal desperation, fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Eliza's cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide with something that might have been wonder. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "I shouldn't have. Don't." She pressed fingers to his lips. "Don't apologize for treating me like I have a choice, like what I want matters." "It does matter. That's why we need to be careful. You're vulnerable, scared. I know exactly what I am," she interrupted. "And for the first time in years, I know what I want." She stood, holding out her hand. "But I won't beg, and I won't ask twice." Nathaniel looked at her extended hand, understanding the gift and the burden she was offering. To take it would change everything between them. To refuse might break something that was already fragile. He took her hand. She led him to the bedroom, movements sure despite the tremor in her fingers. When she turned to face him, vulnerability flickered in her eyes. "I don't know how to be. With him it was never—" She stopped, frustrated. "I don't know how to do this when it's my choice." "There's no wrong way," Nathaniel said gently. "And we don't have to do anything. Being here is enough." "Is it?" She stepped closer, hands settling on his chest. "Because I've been dying by degrees for 2 years. I want to remember what it feels like to be alive." He caught her hands, holding them still. "You're sure?" "I'm sure that those men will be back. I'm sure that time is running out. And I'm sure that if I don't take this moment, I'll regret it for whatever life I have left." She looked up at him. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, he drew her close and kissed her again. This time there was no desperation, only careful exploration. She sighed against his mouth, her whole body relaxing as if she'd been holding her breath for years. What followed was gentle and patient, a careful relearning of trust and tenderness. Nathaniel treated her like spun glass, alert to every flinch, every moment of hesitation. But Eliza, once committed, showed a courage that humbled him. She reclaimed herself touch by touch, kiss by kiss, until there was no room left for ghosts. Later, they lay entwined in the narrow bed, afternoon light painting golden stripes across the quilts. Eliza traced patterns on Nathaniel's chest, looking more at peace than he'd ever seen her. "I didn't know it could be like that," she said quietly. "Gentle, like I mattered." "You do matter," she smiled sadly. "For now, until reality comes knocking again." As if in answer to her words, a wolf howled somewhere in the distance, but this time she didn't flinch, only pressed closer to his warmth. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "About the men? First we prepare, then we see what move they make." He kissed her forehead. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Today, we have this, a stolen afternoon," she murmured, "worth whatever comes next." Nathaniel wanted to promise her more, safety, freedom, a future. But he'd learned the cost of promises he couldn't keep. So instead, he held her close and memorized the moment, the weight of her head on his shoulder, the whisper of her breathing, the way the light caught in her dark hair. Outside, the false spring was already ending. New clouds gathered on the horizon, promising more snow by nightfall. The men would be making camp, planning their next move. Time was indeed running short, but for now, in the quiet of the cabin, 2 damaged souls had found a moment of peace. It might not last, probably wouldn't last, but it was real and it was theirs. In the harsh arithmetic of the frontier, sometimes that was all anyone could ask for. When evening came, they rose and dressed in companionable silence. Eliza prepared supper while Nathaniel checked weapons and secured the cabin. They didn't speak of what had passed between them, but it lived in every glance, every accidental touch. That night, when the wolves howled, Eliza didn't retreat to the bedroom. She sat beside Nathaniel at the fire, the Henry rifle across her lap, ready to face whatever came. The transformation was complete, from hunted to hunter, from victim to survivor. "Teach me more," she said. "Everything you know about fighting, tracking, surviving. If they come for me, I want to be ready." Nathaniel looked at her, hair bound back, eyes steady, hands sure on the weapon, and saw not the frightened woman who'd stumbled through his door, but someone altogether more dangerous. A woman with something to fight for. "All right," he said. "We'll start at first light." The wolves called again, and this time, Eliza smiled. The decision to run came with the new moon, when darkness would cloak their escape. 3 days had passed since Hayes and Murphy's visit. 3 days of watching shadows and jumping at sounds. Nathaniel had spotted them twice more, circling like patient wolves, waiting for proof or opportunity. "We leave tonight," he announced over breakfast, his voice cutting through the morning quiet. "Pack light, only essentials. We'll head north through Crow Pass, then west to the territorial line." Eliza nodded, setting down her coffee with steady hands. The past days had hardened something in her. She no longer startled at unexpected sounds, and her eyes held a determination that reminded him of cavalry horses, trained for battle, ready for whatever came. How far to safety? No place is truly safe, but there's a settlement near the Canadian border. Fort Walsh. Mounted police there don't care much for American bounty hunters. He paused. It's rough country. 2 weeks if the weather holds. Longer if it doesn't. "I can make it." He believed her. She'd taken to his teaching with fierce dedication, learning to move silent through snow, to read weather signs, to handle both rifle and knife. More importantly, she'd learned to master her fear, to use it rather than be ruled by it. They spent the day preparing. Nathaniel packed jerky, hardtack, coffee, ammunition. Eliza gathered blankets, medical supplies, anything useful that wouldn't weigh them down. Neither spoke of what they were leaving behind. The warmth of the cabin, the illusion of safety, the bed where they'd found unexpected solace. As dusk fell, Nathaniel made one last round of the cabin, checking for anything that might reveal their destination. His eyes lingered on small things, the chair where Eliza read by firelight, the table where they'd played cards, the hearth that had witnessed their first kiss. 3 years he'd lived here in self-imposed exile, and only now, leaving, did it feel like a home. "Ready?" Eliza appeared in the doorway, dressed in men's clothing he'd altered to fit her smaller frame. The transformation was complete. No trace remained of the desperate woman who'd stumbled through his door. This was someone new, forged by necessity and tempered by choice. Almost. He crossed to her, framing her face with his hands. "Once we leave, there's no coming back. You understand that? There's nothing to come back to," she said simply. "Everything that matters goes with us." He kissed her then, pouring promise and prayer into the contact. When they broke apart, her eyes were bright but determined. "Let's go." They slipped out the back, using the creek to mask their tracks. The horses, his steady mare and a gelding he'd traded for last summer, stood ready, loaded with supplies. Nathaniel helped Eliza mount, then swung up onto his own horse. The forest swallowed them immediately. Pine branches heavy with snow created a tunnel of shadows, muffling sound and blocking the stars. They rode single file, Nathaniel leading, picking their way carefully through familiar trails. Every snap of twig, every rustle of wind, might herald discovery. 2 hours in, the storm hit. It came from nowhere, the way mountain storms did, one moment clear, the next a wall of white. Wind drove ice crystals horizontal, stinging exposed skin and making the horses dance nervously. "Stay close," Nathaniel shouted over the gale. "Don't lose sight of me." They pressed on, heads down, trusting the horses to find footing in the deepening snow. What should have been a few hours' ride to the first shelter stretched into a nightmare of cold and disorientation. Nathaniel's internal compass, usually reliable, spun wildly in the whiteout conditions. Then Eliza's horse stumbled. The gelding went down hard, throwing her into a drift. Nathaniel was off his mare instantly, fighting through knee-deep snow to reach her. "I'm all right," she gasped, struggling to stand. "But the horse—" The gelding thrashed in the snow, right foreleg bent at an unnatural angle. Nathaniel's heart sank. A lame horse in these conditions meant death, for the animal and possibly for them. "Can you ride double?" he asked, already knowing it would slow them dangerously. "Wait." Eliza approached the injured horse, speaking soft words. The animal calmed under her touch, trusting despite its pain. She looked back at Nathaniel, and he saw the question in her eyes. He handed her his revolver wordlessly. She took it with steady hands, whispered something in the horse's ear, then did what needed doing. The shot was muffled by wind, but the finality of it echoed. They redistributed essential supplies to Nathaniel's mare, abandoning the rest. Eliza swung up behind him, arms tight around his waist, and they continued into the storm. Hours passed in white blindness. The mare struggled with their combined weight, each step a battle against deep drifts. Nathaniel's hands went numb on the reins, and behind him, Eliza shivered violently despite their shared warmth. "There," she said suddenly in his ear. "Light." He squinted through the driving snow and saw it, a faint glow off to the left. Not their intended shelter, but any port in this storm. He turned the mare toward it. The light resolved into a tiny trapper's shack, more lean-to than cabin. Smoke trickled from a pipe chimney, promising warmth. Nathaniel helped Eliza down, then approached cautiously, hand on his rifle. "Hello, the house," he called. The door cracked open, revealing a grizzled face and the barrel of a shotgun. "State your business. Travelers caught in the storm. We need shelter. Can pay." The man studied them, taking in their condition. "That's so?" His eyes lingered on Eliza. "Don't get many travelers this way, especially not with women." "My wife," Nathaniel said firmly. "We're headed to Fort Walsh to see her sister." "Wife, huh?" The trapper spat tobacco juice into the snow. "Well, suppose Christian charity says I shouldn't turn folks out to freeze. Come in then, but the shotgun stays handy." The shack's interior was cramped and smoky but blessedly warm. A small stove radiated heat, and furs covered every surface. The trapper, who gave his name as Josiah, watched them with suspicious eyes as they shed wet outer clothes. "Tea's hot," he offered grudgingly. "Got stew if you're hungry, though I'm wondering what kind of fool travels Crow Pass in weather like this." "The kind running out of time," Nathaniel replied honestly. Josiah's eyes sharpened. "Running, are you? From the law?" "From something worse," Eliza said quietly. "Men who use the law for their own ends." The old trapper studied her for a long moment. "You'd be the woman them fellas was asking about, the ones camping down mountain." Nathaniel's hand drifted to his gun. "You tell them anything? Do I look like a man who helps bounty hunters?" Josiah spat again. "Been living free out here 40 years. Got no use for men who drag folks back to captivity, legal or otherwise." They ate Josiah's surprisingly good stew while the storm raged outside. The trapper proved more talkative with food in him, sharing stories of the mountains and the changes he'd seen. "Used to be a man could disappear out here," he mused. "Now they got railroads and telegraphs and laws reaching into every corner. Where's a body supposed to find freedom anymore?" "North," Nathaniel said. "Canada. Maybe. For a while. But borders got a way of shifting, and laws got a way of following." He looked at Eliza. "You prepared for a life on the run, missus? It ain't easy, always looking over your shoulder." "Neither is the alternative," she replied. Josiah nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Tell you what, storm should break by dawn. There's a hunter's trail runs parallel to Crow Pass, harder going but less traveled. Might serve you better than the main route." "Why help us?" Nathaniel asked. The old man shrugged. "Had a daughter once. Pretty thing, full of fire. Married a man who dimmed that fire bit by bit, till there was nothing left but ash. By the time I tried to help, was too late." He stared into his cup. "Maybe helping you balances the ledger a mite." They slept in shifts, Nathaniel keeping first watch while Eliza curled between him and the stove. The storm's fury gradually spent itself, leaving eerie quiet in its wake. Near dawn, Josiah woke and began preparing provisions. "Trail markers," he explained, showing them notches carved in trees. "Follow these north-northwest. 2 days hard riding puts you at Brennan's trading post. Tell him Josiah sent you. He'll see you right." "We're grateful," Eliza said, pressing a small leather pouch into his hands. "This isn't much, but keep your money. Josiah said gruffly. Just stay free. That's payment enough. They left as the sun painted the snow-covered peaks pink and gold. The hunter's trail was indeed harder, narrow, winding, often disappearing entirely. But it was also beautiful in the stark way of high places, all crystal air and endless white. They rode through the day, stopping only to rest the mare and eat cold provisions. As afternoon wore on, Nathaniel began recognizing landmarks. They were making good time despite everything. How did you know? Eliza asked suddenly. Know what? That you could trust Josiah. He could have turned us in for the reward. Same way I knew I could trust you. Nathaniel replied. Sometimes you just recognize your own kind. She was quiet for a moment. And what kind is that? The broken kind. The kind that's been ground down by the world but refuses to stay down. The kind that chooses freedom over safety, even when it costs everything. Is that what we are? Broken? He considered the question. Maybe. Or maybe we're like bones that heal stronger at the break. Not the same as before, but possibly better. They made camp that night in a sheltered grove, building a small fire they hoped wouldn't be seen. Eliza had learned to set up shelter quickly, her movements efficient despite exhaustion. They shared blankets and body heat, too tired for anything but sleep. But in the pre-dawn darkness, Nathaniel woke to find her watching the stars through the pine branches. Can't sleep. Thinking, she said, about what Josiah said. A life on the run. She turned to face him. Is that what we're heading toward? Always moving, never settling? Maybe for a while, until they stop looking. Will they ever stop? He wanted to lie, to offer comfort, but she deserved truth. I don't know. Men like your husband, they don't like losing, but the world's big, lots of places to disappear. Together, the word held weight, asking questions they hadn't dared voice. If you want, he said carefully. I know this started as necessity, but somewhere along the way, he struggled for words. I can't imagine going back to empty spaces. She kissed him then, soft and sure. Neither can I. They reached Brennan's trading post late the second day, a rough collection of buildings that barely qualified as a settlement. But Josiah's name opened doors. Brennan, a half-Cree trader with knowing eyes, asked no questions beyond practical ones. Borders another week north. He informed them, patrols have been light with the weather, but that'll change. You'll want to cross at night, between shifts. He provided them with fresh horses, supplies, and crucial information about patrol schedules. When Nathaniel tried to pay, Brennan waved him off. Josiah's credit's good here. Besides, he looked at Eliza, some things matter more than money. They spent one night in relative comfort, sleeping in a real bed in a room above the trading post. It felt strange after nights in the wild, too soft and civilized. But it also gave them a chance to clean up, to feel human again. We're going to make it, Eliza said, brushing out her hair by lamplight. I can feel it. Nathaniel hoped she was right. They'd come so far, overcome so much, but the hardest part, the border crossing, still lay ahead. And somewhere behind them, Hayes and Murphy were certainly following, tracking them with the patience of professional hunters. Whatever happens, he said, I want you to know something. These past weeks, even with all the danger and hardship, they've been the best I've had in years. You brought me back to life, Eliza. She set down the brush and came to him. We brought each other back. That's the miracle of it. They held each other in the lamplight. Two souls who'd found salvation in the most unlikely place. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, they had warmth and hope in each other. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering their tracks and buying them precious time. The border waited, and beyond it, the possibility of a life lived on their own terms. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But as Eliza smiled up at him, fierce and free, Nathaniel knew they'd already won the only battle that truly mattered. They'd chosen to fight for something better, together. Everything else was just geography. The border station appeared through the trees like a wound in the forest. A cleared strip of land running east and west as far as the eye could see. Guard towers stood at regular intervals, and even in the fading light, Nathaniel could see the patrols moving between them. Canada lay just beyond, tantalizingly close, yet impossibly far. They'd made good time from Brennan's post, but their luck ran out 2 miles from the crossing. Fresh horse tracks in the snow, moving fast from the south. Nathaniel didn't need to see the riders to know who they were. "They're close," Eliza said, reading the signs as he'd taught her. "Too close. We'll have to wait for full dark. Hope they don't—" The crack of a rifle cut him off. Bark exploded from the tree beside Eliza's head as she threw herself from the saddle. Nathaniel was already moving, pulling his Winchester as he dove for cover. "Well, well." Hayes's voice carried across the snow. "Fancy meeting you folks here." They'd walked into an ambush. The 2 bounty hunters positioned on high ground with clear shots. Nathaniel cursed himself for getting careless this close to freedom. "No need for unpleasantness," Hayes continued. "Just send the lady out, and you can go on your way. This ain't your fight, Cole." So they knew his name now. Must have dug deeper after their first meeting. Nathaniel checked his position. Good cover behind a fallen log. Eliza safe behind a boulder 10 feet away. But they were pinned down with nowhere to run. "Seems to me," Nathaniel called back, "a man makes his own fights, and I've made this one mine." Murphy's younger voice joined in. "That's real touching. But the law's on our side. She's legally bound to return to her husband. You're harboring a fugitive." "Funny thing about the law," Nathaniel replied, sighting down his rifle. "It only reaches as far as men are willing to carry it. And I'm thinking you boys are about at your limit." He fired, sending Murphy scrambling for better cover. The return fire was immediate, bullets whining overhead like angry hornets. "Eliza," he called during a lull. "Remember what I taught you about flanking movements?" "Yes." Her voice was steady despite everything. "On my signal. Head for those pines on the left. I'll keep them busy." He rose up, firing rapidly to draw their attention. From the corner of his eye, he saw Eliza sprint for the trees, moving low and fast. Hayes tried to track her, but Nathaniel's bullets kept him ducking. Then everything went wrong. More riders burst from the southern trail, 4 men in dark coats. Spreading out to surround them? Reinforcements. Of course, Hayes would have backup this close to the border. "Nathaniel!" Eliza's warning came just as one of the new arrivals got a clear shot at him. He rolled aside, feeling the bullet tug at his coat. Return fire from Eliza dropped the man from his saddle. They were outnumbered now, 6-2, with nowhere to run. Nathaniel's ammunition ran low as the firefight intensified. This wasn't how it was supposed to end, this close to freedom. Then he saw Eliza break from cover, not retreating but advancing, using the trees like a Cherokee warrior. She'd learned her lessons well, maybe too well. The Henry rifle barked in her hands, and another bounty hunter fell, but she was exposed now, and Hayes had a clear shot. "No!" Nathaniel burst from cover, racing across open ground. He saw Hayes aim, saw Eliza realize her mistake, saw everything happening too slowly to stop. The shot seemed to echo forever. Nathaniel slammed into Hayes just as he fired, sending the shot wide. They went down in a tangle of limbs, fighting for control of the rifle. Hayes was stronger than he looked, wiry and desperate. They rolled in the snow, each seeking advantage. A boot caught Nathaniel in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Hayes pressed the advantage, trying to bring the rifle barrel around. Then Eliza was there, swinging the Henry like a club. Hayes went limp, blood seeping from his temple. "Behind you!" Nathaniel gasped. She spun, firing from the hip. Murphy's shot went wild as her bullet caught him center mass. He toppled backward, a look of surprise on his young face. The remaining bounty hunters, seeing their leaders fall, suddenly lost enthusiasm for the fight. Nathaniel heard horses retreating rapidly southward. In moments, the forest was quiet except for their ragged breathing. "Are you hurt?" Eliza knelt beside him, hands checking for wounds. "Just winded? You?" "I'm fine. But Nathaniel, you're bleeding." He looked down, surprised to see red spreading across his left side. Adrenaline had masked the pain, but now it came rushing in, hot and sharp. Not immediately fatal, but bad enough. "We need to move," he gritted out. "Those others will be back with more men." Eliza helped him stand, her slight frame surprisingly strong. She whistled for the horses, relieved when both came trotting back. Getting Nathaniel in the saddle took effort, each movement sending fire through his side. "The border station," she said. "It's our only chance now. They won't let us cross. Not with me shot. You covered in blood, and dead men behind us. Then we go around." She studied the terrain with eyes he'd trained. "There, that ravine. Josiah mentioned it. The patrols don't check it because the walls are too steep for horses. Too steep for us too, especially with me like this." "We'll manage." Her voice brooked no argument. "We've come too far to quit now." They rode hard for the ravine, Nathaniel fighting to stay conscious as blood loss took its toll. The world kept trying to gray out at the edges, but Eliza's voice anchored him. The ravine was worse than expected, a sharp gash in the earth, walls of loose shale and ice. At the bottom, a frozen stream that marked the actual border. Getting down would be treacherous. Getting up the far side, nearly impossible. "Leave me," Nathaniel said. "You can make it alone. I'll hold them off when they come." Eliza turned in her saddle, and the look she gave him could have melted steel. "I didn't drag you this far to abandon you now. We go together or not at all." She dismounted, quickly fashioning a travois from branches and rope. "Help me get the supplies transferred. We're leaving the horses." He wanted to argue, but knew she was right. The horses couldn't make the descent. Their only chance was on foot, dragging what they could. The journey down was a nightmare. Each step sent shale cascading, threatening to start a slide that would bury them. Eliza went first, testing each foothold, then helping Nathaniel navigate with his injury. The travois caught on everything, had to be freed constantly. Halfway down, they heard horses approaching above. "There!" A shout from the rim. "They went down the ravine!" Bullets sparked off the rocks around them. Eliza pulled Nathaniel behind an outcropping, returning fire to keep their pursuers honest. But their position was untenable, trapped on a cliff face with enemies above. Then Nathaniel heard something that chilled him more than the bullets, the distinctive sound of rifles being readied en masse. He looked up to see not bounty hunters but uniformed soldiers lining the ravine's edge. The border patrol had heard the shooting. "Halt!" The command echoed off the walls. "Drop your weapons. We're seeking asylum," Eliza shouted. "This man is wounded." "Drop your weapons and surrender. You're on American soil." Nathaniel met Eliza's eyes. They were so close. The frozen stream that marked the border was just 50 feet below. But 50 feet might as well have been 50 miles with rifles trained on them. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I failed you." "No." She gripped his hand fierce and tight. "You gave me hope. You gave me strength. Whatever happens, I regret nothing." They began the slow climb back up, Nathaniel leaning heavily on Eliza. Each step was agony, but she never faltered, never let him fall. At the top, soldiers surrounded them, rifles steady. The sergeant in charge looked them over, a wounded man and a blood-spattered woman, clearly at the end of their run. "You folks have stirred up quite a commotion. 3 dead men back in the forest." "Self-defense," Eliza said clearly. "They attacked us without provocation. That'll be for the law to decide." The sergeant gestured to his men. "Disarm them and—" "Sergeant Morrison!" A new voice interrupted. A figure pushed through the crowd, tall, weathered, wearing the red coat of the Northwest Mounted Police. "These people are on Canadian soil." Morrison scowled. "They're clearly on our side of the line. Inspector." The Mountie, Inspector Campbell according to his insignia, studied the scene carefully. Then he pointed down into the ravine. "See that frozen stream? That's the border, and I distinctly saw these folks cross it before your arrival. They're in Canada now, seeking our protection." "That's a lie and you know it." Campbell shrugged. I know what I saw. And unless you want an international incident over what appears to be a pair of desperate travelers, I suggest you let Canadian authorities handle this. The two forces faced off across the ravine's edge, tension thick as winter ice. Nathaniel held his breath, knowing their fate balanced on diplomatic knife's edge. Finally, Morrison spat in disgust. Fine, but if they set foot back in the States, they won't, Campbell assured him. You have my word. The American soldiers withdrew reluctantly. Campbell waited until they were gone, then looked down at Nathaniel and Eliza. Well, he called, are you planning to freeze to death there? Or would you like to actually enter Canada? The rest of the descent was a blur. Canadian soldiers helped them down, medics tending Nathaniel's wound. They were wrapped in blankets, given hot tea, treated with rough kindness. Why? Eliza asked Campbell later. As they rode toward Fort Walsh. Why help us? The inspector smiled. Let's say I have a particular dislike for bounty hunters who think borders don't apply to them, and perhaps a soft spot for folks seeking a fresh start. He paused. Besides, Morrison's been a thorn in my side for years. Worth it just to see his face. Fort Walsh was civilization of a sort. Log buildings arranged around a parade ground, smoke rising from chimneys, people going about their business. The medics took Nathaniel to the infirmary while Eliza was questioned by Campbell. She told their story simply, without embellishment. A forced marriage, an escape, a flight to freedom. Campbell listened without judgment, taking notes. Your husband will likely petition for your return, he warned. Money talks, even across borders. Then we'll go farther north, Eliza said firmly. As far as necessary. Perhaps that won't be required. Campbell pulled out a telegram. This came yesterday. Darius Munsey died in a range dispute. Apparently, he pushed the wrong neighbor too far. You're a widow, Mrs. Munsey, free to make your own choices. Eliza stared at the paper, emotions warring on her face. Relief, disbelief, and something like grief. Not for the man, but for all the pain that might have been avoided. I don't feel free, she said finally. Too much has happened. Too much was taken. Freedom's like that, Campbell said gently. It's not a feeling so much as a practice. Give it time. Nathaniel recovered slowly. The wound infected, but not mortal. Eliza rarely left his side, reading to him, forcing him to eat, simply being present. When fever took him, she bathed his forehead and whispered promises. When he woke, clear-headed, she was there with water and quiet strength. Marry me, he said one morning, apropos of nothing. She looked up from her sewing. Startled. What? Marry me, here in Canada. Start fresh with new names if you want. Build something together. Nathaniel, you're delirious from medication. Never been more clear-headed. He caught her hand. I know it's fast. I know we've been through hell and maybe that's clouding things. But Eliza, I can't imagine any future that doesn't have you in it. She studied their joined hands. I'm damaged goods. You know that, right? What he did to me, what I've done to survive. You're a survivor, he interrupted. Strong and brave and fierce. That's all I see. I don't even know who I am anymore. Not Mrs. Munsey, not the girl I was before. Someone in between. Then be someone new. Choose any name you want. Just choose to share it with me. She was quiet so long he thought she'd refuse. Then, Elizabeth Cole has a nice sound to it. Is that a yes? That's a yes. They married in the fort's small chapel on a crisp March morning. Campbell stood as witness, along with the doctor who'd saved Nathaniel's life. Eliza wore a simple dress borrowed from the commander's wife. Nathaniel stood straight despite his healing wound. The ceremony was brief, the vows simple, but when the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, something settled in Nathaniel's chest, a sense of rightness he hadn't felt since before his first family died. They stayed at Fort Walsh through spring, Nathaniel recovering fully while Eliza helped in the infirmary. She had a gift for healing, gentle hands and a manner that calmed even the most difficult patients. When the commander's wife suggested she train formally as a nurse, her eyes lit with possibility. But eventually, the walls began to feel confining. They'd fought too hard for freedom to settle for safety. "Where to?" Nathaniel asked one evening. Maps spread before them. "West," Eliza said without hesitation. "All the way to the Pacific, somewhere we can build without looking over our shoulders. Victoria's nice, I hear, or the Fraser Valley, good land, mild weather, and far from everything we're running from." She traced the route with one finger. "A new life. Together. Together." They left Fort Walsh in early summer. Part of a wagon train headed west. The journey was long but peaceful, each mile putting more distance between them and the past. Eliza bloomed in the freedom, laughing more, flinching less. Nathaniel found himself planning again, crops to plant, a house to build, the life they'd both thought impossible. One evening, camped by a river in the Rockies, Eliza took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I have something to tell you." The implications hit him like a physical force. "Are you?" The doctor at Fort Walsh confirmed it. "Due in winter." She watched him anxiously. "I know we didn't plan." He kissed her, cutting off her words. When they broke apart, he was grinning like a fool. "A baby. Our baby. Our baby." She agreed, tears streaming down her face. A fresh start for all of us. They reached the Fraser Valley in late summer, claiming land near a small settlement. The work was hard. Clearing, building, planting. But it was theirs. Each board nailed, each seed planted, was an act of defiance against everyone who'd tried to cage them. The cabin they built was small but sturdy, with windows facing the mountains and a porch where they could watch sunsets. Nothing like the mansion Eliza had fled or the fortress where Nathaniel had hidden. This was a home, built by hope and sweat and stubborn determination. When the first snow came, they were ready. Wood stacked high, root cellar full, everything battened down for winter. Eliza, heavy with child, directed from her chair by the fire while Nathaniel made last preparations. "No regrets?" he asked one evening, watching snow fall gentle outside their window. "None," she said firmly. Every step led here, even the painful ones. The baby came with a February blizzard, as if even their child would make a dramatic entrance. The local midwife talked Eliza through the delivery while Nathaniel paced outside, remembering another birth, another child, praying this time would be different. When the baby's cry pierced the night, strong and healthy, he nearly collapsed with relief. "A daughter," the midwife announced, "perfect as a spring morning." They named her Hope. Spring came gently to the Fraser Valley, painting wildflowers across meadows and filling the air with birdsong. Hope grew sturdy and bright, with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. She crawled through the cabin with determined purpose, investigating every corner of her small world. Nathaniel watched from the porch as Eliza worked in their garden. Hope strapped to her back in a carrier they'd fashioned from canvas and wood. The sight still caught him sometimes. This life they'd built, this peace they'd earned. After so much running, the simple act of staying felt revolutionary. "Letter came," he called, holding up the envelope that had arrived with the supply wagon. Eliza straightened, wiping soil from her hands. They rarely received mail. An unexpected correspondence still made them both tense. She joined him on the porch, Hope babbling happily between them. The return address was Fort Walsh. Inspector Campbell's familiar handwriting spelled out their assumed names: Mr. and Mrs. Jonathan Edwards, the identity they'd adopted for their new life. "What does he say?" Eliza asked as Nathaniel read. "Darius Munsey's estate has been settled. Apparently, he died without a will, and his brothers are fighting over the remains. Campbell says there's no mention of you in any of the legal documents, as far as the world's concerned." Eliza Munsey vanished into thin air. She absorbed this quietly, then took Hope from the carrier, holding their daughter close. "Good. Let her stay vanished. Elizabeth Edwards has everything she needs." But there was more. Campbell mentioned other news. Hayes had survived his injuries but lost his taste for bounty hunting. Murphy's family had claimed his body. a young man dead for another man's greed. The other hunters had scattered, unwilling to pursue a ghost across international borders. "It's over," Nathaniel said softly. "Truly over." Eliza looked out across their land, the garden beginning to green, the mountains standing guard in the distance, the life they'd carved from wilderness and will. "No," she said. "It's just beginning." The community of Riverside, as their settlement called itself, proved welcoming to newcomers. The Edwards family was known as hard-working, reliable folks who kept to themselves but helped when needed. Elizabeth's skill with healing became known, and soon neighbors sought her out for everything from birthing babies to setting bones. "You should study proper," Mrs. Patterson, the schoolteacher's wife, said one day after Eliza had successfully treated her son's fever. "There's a medical college in Victoria that started accepting women. I couldn't," Eliza protested automatically. "Hope needs me, and the farm will be here when you get back." Nathaniel interrupted from the doorway. He'd been listening, waiting for the right moment. "You've got a gift, Eliza. Be ashamed to waste it." They discussed it late into the night, Hope sleeping between them in the big bed they'd built together. The idea terrified and thrilled Eliza in equal measure. Formal education, a profession of her own, the chance to heal rather than harm. "But it means leaving you both for months at a time," she worried. "Then we'll come visit. Victoria's not the end of the world, and Hope should see more than just these mountains." He touched her face gently. "You gave me back my life. Let me help you build yours." By autumn, arrangements were made. Eliza would spend 3 months in Victoria for initial training, returning home between terms. Mrs. Patterson agreed to help with Hope during the busy harvest season. It wasn't ideal, but it was possible, and possible was all they'd ever needed. The night before she left, they walked to the high meadow behind their cabin. Hope toddled between them, chasing fireflies with chubby hands. The valley spread below, peaceful in twilight. "Scared?" Nathaniel asked. "Terrified," Eliza admitted. "But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means you're alive and choosing to stay that way." "That's my girl." He pulled her close, Hope clutching their legs. "Both my girls." Victoria proved overwhelming at first. Buildings pressed close, streets busy with strangers, the college full of young women who'd never known anything but privilege. Eliza felt out of place in her homemade dresses, conscious of her work-rough hands and the gaps in her formal education. But she'd survived worse than social awkwardness. She threw herself into studies with the same determination that had carried her through blizzards and gunfights. Anatomy, chemistry, diagnosis. She absorbed it all, driven by memories of wounds she couldn't treat, suffering she couldn't ease. Letters from home sustained her. Nathaniel wrote weekly, his careful script detailing Hope's new words, the harvest's progress, small moments of daily life. Sometimes he'd let Hope scribble at the bottom, wild crayon marks that Eliza treasured more than gold. "Your husband must miss you terribly." Her roommate, a young woman named Catherine, observed one evening as Eliza read her latest letter for the 3rd time. "We miss each other," Eliza agreed. "But we've been apart before, in worse circumstances. At least now I know he's safe, and I'll see him soon." "How did you meet?" Catherine asked, curious about this older student with her mysterious past. Eliza smiled, remembering. "I knocked on his door in a storm. He let me in." The simple truth of it, stripped of context, still captured everything essential. 2 damaged souls, offering shelter to each other. Everything else was just details. She excelled in her studies, particularly in treating traumatic injuries. Her professors noted her unusual calm in crisis situations, her ability to make quick decisions under pressure. They didn't know she'd learned these skills with bullets flying and lives hanging in the balance. That was knowledge she kept to herself. The reunion at Christmas was sweet beyond words. Hope had grown inches and learned dozens of new words, including a very emphatic "mama" that she shrieked repeatedly upon Eliza's return. Nathaniel had let his beard grow full for winter, looking like the mountain man she'd first met. "How's the doctoring?" he asked that first night, after Hope finally slept. "Hard, wonderful, exhausting." She curled against him, relearning the shape of home. "How's the farming?" "Lonely, profitable, worth it if it makes you happy." "You make me happy," she corrected. Us, that's what matters. Everything else is just more." They spent the winter holidays like any family, decorating a small tree, teaching Hope about snow angels, sharing quiet evenings by the fire. But underneath ran currents of hard-won appreciation. They knew the value of peace because they'd paid for it in blood and fear. Spring brought unexpected visitors. Eliza was home between terms, helping Nathaniel prepare fields for planting. When riders approached, old instincts flared, her hand moving toward the rifle they still kept handy, before she recognized the lead rider. "Inspector Campbell," Nathaniel called, rising from where he'd been mending fence. "What brings you south?" Campbell dismounted, older but still sharp-eyed. "Retirement, actually. Decided to see some of the country I spent 40 years protecting. Remembered you folks had settled here." They invited him for supper, Hope charming their guest with her chatter and determined attempts to feed him her mashed peas. After the meal, Campbell produced a package from his saddlebags. "Wedding gift," he said gruffly. "Bit late, but then you folks were in a hurry to start living." Inside was a photograph, their wedding day at Fort Walsh, captured by the fort's photographer without their knowledge. They looked young and fierce and hopeful, dressed in borrowed clothes but wearing their own hard-won freedom. "Thank you," Eliza whispered, eyes bright. "We didn't know anyone took this. Figured you might want proof," Campbell said. "That you made it, that it was real." They talked late into the night, sharing stories and memories. Campbell had news of mutual acquaintances, updates on the changing territories, but more than gossip. He brought perspective. "You two did something rare," he observed as the evening wound down. "Took a bad situation and refused to let it define you. Built something good from the ashes." "We had help," Nathaniel pointed out. "You, Josiah, Brennan, people who chose kindness when they didn't have to." "Maybe, but plenty of folks get help and still stay stuck. You chose to keep moving, keep building. That's on you." After Campbell left, continuing his retirement journey, Eliza hung the photograph in their bedroom, proof, as he'd said. On the hardest days, when memories ambushed her, when nightmares found Nathaniel, when the past felt closer than the present, they could look at it and remember. They'd survived. More than survived. Eliza's final year of training flew by. She specialized in frontier medicine, learning to work with limited supplies and harsh conditions. Her thesis on treating traumatic injuries in remote settings drew from unnamed personal experience, earning high marks and job offers from several territories. But she knew where she belonged. The graduation ceremony in Victoria was small, a handful of women receiving certificates in nursing and midwifery. Nathaniel and Hope made the journey, Hope in a new dress that she kept smoothing with proud hands. "Mama pretty," she announced to everyone nearby, pointing at Eliza in her graduation robes. "Yes," Nathaniel agreed, his voice thick with pride. "Mama's beautiful." That night in their hotel, Hope asleep between them, Eliza traced the certificate with wondering fingers. Elizabeth Edwards, licensed medical practitioner, official recognition of skills born from necessity, refined by education. "Do you ever think about them?" she asked quietly. "The people we used to be," Nathaniel considered. "Sometimes. Mostly I'm grateful they let us here, then got out of the way. I dream about her sometimes, that girl who knocked on your door, so scared, so desperate." She paused. "I want to tell her it works out, that the fear ends, that she finds home." "She knows," Nathaniel assured her. "Every woman you heal, every child you help bring into the world, that's you telling her, showing her what's possible." They returned to Riverside to find the community had prepared a surprise. A small building at the town's edge had been fixed up. A sign hanging by the door. E. Edwards, medical practitioner. Inside were basic supplies Examination table. Everything needed for a frontier practice. We figured you'd need a proper place. Mrs., Patterson explained, beaming. Can't have our doctor working out of her kitchen forever. Eliza couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Nathaniel's hand found hers, squeezing support and understanding. Hope, oblivious to the magnitude of the moment, toddled inside and promptly claimed the visitor's chair as her throne. The practice thrived. Eliza treated everything from farming accidents to difficult births, earning trust through competence and compassion. She never turned anyone away for lack of payment, accepting chickens and vegetables as readily as cash. The girl who'd fled with nothing had become a pillar of her community, healing bodies and sometimes souls. One autumn evening, as she returned from delivering twins at a neighboring farm, she found Nathaniel and Hope in the garden. They were planting bulbs for spring. Hope's help creating more mess than progress. The setting sun painted everything golden, and for a moment, Eliza just stood watching, her family, her home, her life. Nathaniel looked up, smiling. Good day. The best, she said, joining them in the dirt. 2 healthy boys, mother doing well. Mama dirty, Hope observed, delighted by this turn of events. Yes, Eliza agreed, pulling her daughter close despite the garden soil. Mama's dirty and tired and exactly where she wants to be. They worked until darkness fell, planting promises for spring. Later, after Hope slept and the house settled into quiet, Nathaniel and Eliza sat on their porch, watching stars emerge. Any regrets? He asked. Their old ritual? Only one, she said after long consideration. He tensed slightly. Oh, I wish we'd met sooner. Had more time. He relaxed, pulling her close. We have time now. Years and years of ordinary days. Ordinary? She repeated, tasting the word. What a wonderful thing to be. A wolf howled somewhere in the mountains, but the sound no longer brought fear. It was just part of the wild landscape they'd chosen. Like snow and storms and spring flowers, they'd made peace with the wilderness, internal and external. I love you, Eliza said. Words worn smooth by repetition, but never empty. And I love you, Nathaniel replied, sealing the promise with a kiss. Inside, hope stirred in her sleep, murmuring dreams. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, patients to treat, fields to tend, a daughter to raise. But tonight, they had this, each other, their home, and the quiet victory of lives rebuilt from rubble. The photograph from Fort Walsh caught moonlight from its place on the wall. Those younger selves looking forward into an uncertain future. If she could, Eliza would tell that desperate bride, you make it, you build something beautiful. The fear ends, and what replaces it is better than anything you dared imagine. But perhaps that scared girl already knew. Perhaps that's why she kept going, kept fighting, kept believing that somewhere past the storm, hope waited. And perhaps that's all any of them could do, knock on doors in the darkness, offer shelter to each other, and trust that morning would come. It always did. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in late summer, 5 years after their flight from Montana. Eliza was treating young Tommy Patterson for a broken arm when Nathaniel appeared in the doorway of her clinic, paper in hand, face unreadable. What is it? She asked, though something in her already knew. News that required immediate delivery was rarely good. Darius Muncey's brothers are dead, he said quietly. Both of them. Train derailment outside Cheyenne. Eliza's hand stilled on Tommy's splint. The boy looked between the adults, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Mrs. Edwards? Does it hurt? Tommy asked, worried he'd done something wrong. No, sweetheart. You're being very brave. She finished securing the splint with practiced movements, though her mind raced. All done. Keep it dry and come back in 2 weeks. After the Pattersons left, she sank into a chair, staring at the telegram Nathaniel handed her. The details were sparse. An accident. 3 prominent Wyoming cattlemen among the casualties. Estates to be settled. There's more, Nathaniel said gently. Campbell sent a separate letter. Seems the Muncie lawyers have been looking for you. For Eliza Muncie. That is, you're named in some old documents they found. I don't want anything from that family, she said immediately. Nothing. I know, but Campbell thinks you should at least hear what they have to say. Says it might be about your sister. Rebecca. Eliza hadn't spoken the name aloud in years, but her sister's face still haunted quiet moments. 16 when Eliza fled. Probably married off by now to secure more debts or alliances. How would they even find me? Eliza Muncie is dead. Legal notices in newspapers. Campbell's been watching, intercepting them. But if you never respond, eventually they'll declare you legally dead and move on. They were quiet for a moment, the weight of the past settling around them like smoke. Outside, Hope's laughter carried from where she played with the Brennan children, carefree and unaware of shadows that had shaped her existence. I can't go back, Eliza said finally. Not even for Rebecca. I can't risk— You don't have to. Nathaniel knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. But what if she needs help? What if she's in the same situation you were? The thought had tormented Eliza for years. She'd saved herself but left her sister behind. The guilt was a stone she carried, heavy and smooth from handling. That evening, after Hope was asleep, they composed a careful letter. Not to the lawyers, but to Campbell, asking him to investigate discreetly. What had become of Rebecca? Was she safe? Did she need help? The response came 3 weeks later. Campbell had used old connections, asked careful questions. Rebecca had married at 17, not to a cruel man, but to a young banker named James Morrison. By all accounts, it was a love match. They lived in Denver with 2 small children. She was, Campbell reported, happy and well settled. Eliza wept when she read those words, years of guilt washing away in a flood of relief. Nathaniel held her as she sobbed, understanding that sometimes good news could break a heart as thoroughly as bad. She's safe, Eliza kept repeating. She's safe and happy, and I didn't ruin her life by leaving. You saved your life by leaving, Nathaniel corrected firmly. And look what you've done with it. But the lawyer's search raised uncomfortable questions. How long before someone connected Elizabeth Edwards with Eliza Muncie? Their carefully built life suddenly felt fragile again. We could move, Eliza suggested one night. Further north, Alaska maybe, or— No. Nathaniel's voice was firm. We're not running anymore. This is our home, Hope's home. If trouble comes, we face it here. As autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and red, life continued its rhythm. Eliza delivered babies, set bones, and treated fevers. Nathaniel brought in the harvest with help from neighbors. Hope started school, proud in her new dress and determined to learn everything immediately. Then the stranger arrived. He was young, well-dressed, clearly out of place in their frontier town. He asked questions at the general store, showed a photograph. Eliza saw him from her clinic window and knew with cold certainty who he sought. That night, she loaded the rifle they still kept by the door. He's here for me. We don't know that, Nathaniel said, though his own hand checked his revolver. Who else would send a city lawyer to Riverside? They didn't sleep, taking turns at the window, watching. But morning came without incident. The stranger took breakfast at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, then walked directly to Eliza's clinic. She met him at the door, Nathaniel visible behind her. Can I help you? Mrs. Edwards, my name is Theodore Hartley. I'm looking for someone, and I believe you might be able to help. He produced the photograph, a younger Eliza in a fine dress, unmistakably her despite the years. I don't know this person, Eliza said evenly. Please, Mrs. Edwards, or should I say Mrs. Muncie? His voice was gentle, not threatening. I'm not here to cause trouble. Quite the opposite. I represent your sister, Rebecca Morrison. The world tilted. Eliza gripped the doorframe. Rebecca sent you. May I come in? This conversation shouldn't happen in the street. They gathered in the clinic's small office. Hope at school. Nathaniel standing protective near Eliza's chair. Hartley explained carefully, producing documents as he spoke. Your sister has been searching for you for years. After her marriage, she hired investigators, but the trail went cold in Montana. It wasn't until the Muncie estate matters arose that we got a lead. Inspector Campbell of the Mounted Police had made inquiries about Rebecca on someone's behalf. We traced it back here. Is she all right? Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. Is she happy? Very happy, but incomplete. She speaks of you constantly, blames herself for not helping you escape. He leaned forward earnestly. She wants to see you, to know you're alive and well. Nothing more. And if I refuse? Then I never found you. She'll mourn, but she'll accept it. This isn't about money or inheritance. Rebecca wants nothing from the Muncie estate either. This is about sisters. Eliza looked at Nathaniel, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. The risk was enormous, but the guilt of abandoning Rebecca had never fully healed. And now, she could come here, Nathaniel suggested. If she's willing, see Eliza on our terms, our territory. Hartley smiled. She hoped you'd say that. In fact, she's waiting in Victoria. She didn't want to presume, but she couldn't stay away once we found you. The reunion happened 2 days later at the hotel in Victoria. Eliza almost didn't recognize the elegant woman who rose from the settee. Rebecca had grown beautiful, poised, carrying herself with confidence Eliza had never possessed at that age. Then Rebecca's composure cracked. Eliza, oh God, it's really you. She crossed the room in a rush, pulling her sister into a fierce embrace. I thought you were dead. I thought he'd killed you. They cried together, 5 years of separation dissolving in tears. When they finally pulled apart, Rebecca studied Eliza's face hungrily. You look different, stronger, happier? I am. Eliza drew Nathaniel forward. This is my husband, Nathaniel, and this, she lifted Hope, who'd been hiding behind her skirts, is our daughter. Hope. Rebecca's eyes widened. You have a family, a real family, as do you. I hear. They spent hours catching up, careful at first, then with increasing openness. Rebecca told of her marriage, how James had courted her properly, how her stepmother had supported the match against other suitors who offered more money but less kindness. After you left, she changed. Rebecca explained. I think she finally understood what she'd allowed to happen. She protected me after that, as much as she could. And you're happy? Eliza needed to hear it again. Truly, truly, though I've missed my sister every day. Rebecca reached for Eliza's hand. When I heard what Darius did to you, what you endured, I wanted to kill him myself. He's dead now. It's over. Is it? Rebecca studied her shrewdly. You're living under a false name in a frontier town. That doesn't sound over. Eliza and Nathaniel exchanged glances. Then, decision made. Eliza told their story. The flight through the blizzard, the bounty hunters, the shootout at the border. Rebecca listened with growing horror and admiration. You fought your way out? She breathed. Actually fought, with guns. We did what we had to, Nathaniel said simply. To survive, to be free. And now, are you free? Eliza considered the question. We are. Elizabeth and Jonathan Edwards have a good life. Friends, work, community. It's not the life I was born to, but it's the life I chose. Then that's all that matters. Rebecca squeezed her hand. Though I hate that we have to pretend to be strangers. We don't, Eliza said suddenly. Not entirely. You could visit, carefully, quietly. Hope should know her aunt. Your children should know their cousin. You'd risk that? Family's worth some risk, Nathaniel interjected. We've learned that the hard way. They arranged a system. Letters through Hartley's office. Visits perhaps once a year. Always discreet. Rebecca would be a distant cousin of Elizabeth's. Visiting from Denver. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than either sister had dared hope for. The night before Rebecca left, they walked along Victoria's harbor, Hope running ahead to chase seagulls. She's beautiful, Rebecca said, watching her niece. Free in a way we never were at that age. That's the point, Eliza replied. To give her what we didn't have. Choices, safety. The right to say no. You've done it then. Won. It's not about winning. It's about building something better from the broken pieces. Rebecca stopped walking, turning to face her sister fully. I need to say something. I'm sorry. For not seeing what was happening, for not helping, for being too young and scared to— You were 16, Eliza interrupted. A child, and I left to protect you as much as myself. There's nothing to forgive. They embraced again. Two women who'd survived different battles but carried matching scars. When they parted, both knew it might be months or years before the next meeting. But the connection had been remade, stronger for having been tested. Back in Riverside, life resumed its rhythms, but something had shifted. The secret of Eliza's past no longer felt like a weight, but like a source of strength. She'd survived the worst men could do and built something beautiful from the ashes. Winter came early that year, blanketing the valley in pristine white. Eliza stood in her clinic one December morning, watching snow fall as she prepared for the day's patients. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Unusual. As the clinic wasn't yet open, a young woman stood on the threshold, thin and shivering, a bruise darkening her cheek. Her eyes held a familiar desperation, the look of someone running from something terrible. "Please," she whispered. "Can you help me? I have nowhere else to go." Eliza didn't hesitate. "Come in, you're safe here." As she tended the woman's injuries, listening to a story painfully similar to her own. Eliza thought of that night 5 years ago when she'd knocked on Nathaniel's door, how one act of kindness had changed everything. Now it was her turn to open a door, to offer shelter from the storm. That evening, after settling the young woman, Sarah, in their spare room, Eliza told Nathaniel about their visitor. "She'll need help getting away from him, starting over, all of it." "Then we'll help," he said simply. "The way others helped us. It could bring trouble if her husband comes looking." Nathaniel checked his rifle, the gesture so familiar it was almost comforting. "Let him come." "We've faced worse." Hope, playing with her doll by the fire, looked up. "Is the sad lady staying with us?" "For a while," Eliza confirmed. "Until she's not sad anymore." "Good," Hope declared. "Everyone should have a safe place." From the mouths of babes, Eliza thought. She kissed her daughter's head, marveling at the wisdom innocence could carry. Later, as the household slept, Eliza and Nathaniel sat by the dying fire. The Winchester hung on its pegs. The Henry rifle stood in the corner, reminders of what they'd survived. But now they protected more than just their own freedom. "No regrets?" Nathaniel asked. "Their old ritual?" "None," Eliza confirmed. "This is what we were saved for, to save others." He pulled her close, and they watched the embers glow. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the world in temporary peace. But beneath the white blanket, seeds waited for spring. Seeds of hope, of freedom, of new beginnings. Their own story had started with a knock on a door in a storm. Now they'd opened their door to another desperate soul. The cycle continued, each act of courage making the next one possible. "I love you," Eliza whispered into the quiet. "And I love you," Nathaniel replied. "Always." In the spare room. Sarah slept safely for perhaps the first time in months. Tomorrow would bring challenges, plans to make, a journey to arrange, a new life to build. But tonight, she was warm and protected, surrounded by people who understood. The photograph from Fort Walsh still hung on their bedroom wall, those younger selves frozen in time. But Eliza no longer needed to look at it to remember how far they'd come. The evidence lived in every breath. Hope's laughter, Nathaniel's steady presence, the clinic where she healed bodies and sometimes souls, the door they kept open for those who needed shelter. They'd been knocked down, hunted, nearly broken, but they'd refused to stay down. They'd built something unshakable from the ruins, not just a life, but a legacy of compassion, passed from one survivor to the next. The fire died to ashes, but warmth remained. In this house built by hope and determination, In this family forged by choice rather than chance, in this love that had weathered every storm, warmth would always remain. And somewhere in the vast wilderness of the frontier, another desperate soul might be struggling through snow, looking for light in the darkness. When they found it, when they knocked on that door, someone would answer. Someone always would, because that's what love did. It opened doors, offered shelter, and refused to let the cold win. Eliza smiled in the darkness, pulling Nathaniel closer, listening to the quiet breathing of everyone under their roof. Safe, loved, free. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening at home? During your commute? Or perhaps winding down before bed? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback means everything to us, and I can't wait to hear what touched your heart in Nathaniel and Eliza's journey.